So, chapters 3 and 4 of Deltarune were pretty great. We finally got to meet the famous knight, whose situation is a lot more complicated and cool than most people predicted. She's a weird dark demon who has a seemingly arbitrary and convoluted plan, and is also weirdly buddies with Chris. I'm pretty sure we all agree on who the knight is, but that turned out to be the least important mystery surrounding them. Something that's been confusing me and many others for a while is, what the knight is, and it's clear that the answer is going to be a big point of focus for the game. Even if the knight is Des, she's clearly not her normal self. She flies, shape-shifts, shoots a weird beam, rips open her chest, and also just looks like that. That's not how normal Lightners look. But that's also not even how normal Darkners look. It looks a lot more like a weird darkness creature similar to the Titan Spawn or Irem. The knight being a weird abstract being like those guys is honestly cool, but it naturally leaves us with a lot of confusion as to what is actually going on here. Since there's so little to work with when it comes to these things, most interpretations are mostly reliant on vibes and speculation. And, well, mine is no different. But still, I think it's a pretty cool idea. Pretty much what I think is happening, is that the knight is actually a being separate from Des. It was created from her, and it acts on her behalf, but it has the characteristics of an abstract darkness thing. The knight isn't exactly Des, but it's her shadow. So Deltarune is all about darkness, right? In this game, darkness is a physical substance that creates giant imagination fantasy worlds. But something that's also brought up a lot is the concept of shadows. We have the shadow crystals, so called because you can only see their shadow, which seem to come from the night. Also, shadows are sometimes used synonymously with darkness when people are talking about dark fountains. Like, the shadows starting to grow, the light getting subsumed by shadow, and of course my favorite, the shadows cutting deeper. Shadows aren't mentioned excessively, but it's often enough to be notable, I think. And since shadows are dark, I think it would make sense for Deltarune to explore that concept and how it relates to dark worlds. So with that, what would a shadow be in the context of Deltarune? Well, in real life, a shadow is pretty much a perfect silhouette of a person, but it's completely dark. You can recognize people by their defining features, but you can't see their face. The shadow isn't really like the person it's attached to, since it's essentially a husk that only retains their most essential physical features. However, it does mimic all of their movements exactly, despite not being able to think for itself. Shadows can also be stretched and warped, and even morphed into something that doesn't look human at all. In the dark, their appearance and movements can be exaggerated, and they can make you see all kinds of crazy things. Something about this seems familiar. Anyway, thanks to Ralsei's poorly timed monologue, we have a really explicit idea of what darkness is supposed to represent in Deltarune. As the room gets darker, your perception becomes less and less accurate, and it becomes easier for things in your imagination to become real. Essentially, there's less that you can actually see, so your mind fills in the blanks. All of these giant fantastical worlds are created from a combination of imagination and determination. It's that special power that brings objects to life, and makes them into darkness. Because of the nature of shadows, I feel like it's intuitive to think that they would be unlike all the average darkners. With things like playing cards and laptops, it's easy to give them a personality if you're imaginative enough. And Ram's cool dialogue shows that this is actually a huge part of how dark worlds work. Chris and Des gave the objects life, and when that imagination world becomes real, the darkness personalities and designs are directly based off of how Chris and Des imagined them. The darkness takes the object and brings it to life, exaggerating the features that gave it personality in the light world. This is important, because it puts shadows in a unique position, for a few reasons. First of all, a shadow is just a blank silhouette. On one hand, this might make it impossible to imagine it as having any personality. After all, your mind can't make anything of nothing. If there's nothing for your mind to latch onto, then the shadow could become nothing but an empty husk with no personality. On the other hand, having a blank slate like this could make it easier than ever to inject your interpretation into it. Instead of letting your imagination fill in the blanks, it's now painting the entire picture. The end result would be something that comes entirely from the creator, without a hint of outside influence. So when it comes to the knight, which one of these two is what's happening? Well, it seems pretty clear that the knight does have a personality. It enjoys killing people, taunting Susie, and acting menacing. It seems that the knight does have Des's personality, which leads to my next thing. This shadow isn't just any silhouette, it's the silhouette of Des. It invokes her, without actually looking anything like her. And of course, a shadow copies your movements exactly. This means that the knight would be very good at acting like Des. It makes sense that it would inherit her personality, since it was made in her image. In a way, Des's essence is inherently imbued in the knight. This topic will come back later, so remember it. For now, I think the most significant thing is that a shadow is made entirely of darkness. Obviously, the implications of a being that's made out of literal darkness would be huge in Deltarune, and I think it offers a pretty nice explanation for the knight's supernatural abilities. If the knight is a shadow, that means it's not just an object that was brought to life by darkness. It's the darkness itself. It can do whatever it pleases, and change all it wants, because it's not grounded by something tangible. It is nothing, so in the eyes of the shadow caster, the fountain maker, and the observer, it can be anything. Oh. Right. The elephant in the room. I still haven't talked about what the knight really is in the light world. I enjoy the idea of this shadow metaphor, but I'm still not really sure what she actually, literally, is. She has to have a physical form in the light world, so, she can't just be a shadow. But then there's also everything that screams the knight isn't a normal lightner. So, I'm not sure. This is where the theory falters a bit, since I don't really have an explanation that fits just right. But, what I do have are some options. I'm not sure which one is the best, but this is what I have, so I'll go through them one by one. Option 1. The knight really is Des's shadow in the light world. That's its light world object. The shadow was severed from the real Des and is now running around and making fountains. Peter Pan had something similar happen to him, and after all, it's not unlike Toby to hide lore in old Disney movies. And also like Peter Pan, it doesn't really have to follow any actual logic, and the game can just ask us to accept that this is something that can happen to people. I think this is probably the most intuitive conclusion to come to with this theory. If you're wondering how she's able to make dark fountains, well, she just enlists Chris to do it for her. Also Carol is the one who carries Undine to the bunker. So, Des wouldn't really do anything other than stand there and watch. This is why I said it wouldn't really work before. I actually think it might be cool if Des is completely dependent on Chris to even be able to do anything, since that would add a fun extra component to their already complicated relationship. But still, it would be nicer if Des herself could actually do things too. Option 2. In the light world, she's just normal Des. This easily explains how she can do all the things that require a physical body. Pretty much, in the light world, she's a normal lightner, but it's only in the dark world that she transforms into this shadow being. Maybe the knight we see is a darkner based on Des's shadow, but instead of being severed from her, the shadow is still attached and just follows her around everywhere. I guess in the dark world, we can only see her shadow, similar to how shadow crystals work. But this means she would need to be big and strong enough to carry Undine, which obviously seems unlikely. And she would have to sneak around in the night and hope no one notices her. There's also the issue that this concept just doesn't make much sense at all. I don't know, I thought the idea was worth mentioning, but it would obviously feel really weird and somewhat disappointing if Des was actually just fine and normal. Option 3. The knight is a weird abstract type being made of darkness, even in the light world. The way I imagine it, it would sort of be like a sentient clump of darkness that can roam around the light world. Since the previous two options are kind of terrible, this idea came from trying to find some sort of compromise that lets the knight be an unusual creature that's more similar to a darkner than a lightner, while also having a completely physical form. In this interpretation, I guess it would be a more metaphorical shadow. I imagine that it would look pretty similar to how it does in the dark world, but it would of course be a lot physically weaker in the light world. I think the biggest problem with this is that it doesn't work quite as well with the shadowy themes I talked about before. It's not exactly a shadow, but it still sort of works since it's like a person made of darkness. This obviously isn't very straightforward since it's a much more random and vague idea than the other two, but after chapter 4, random and weird ideas about the knight are more on the table than ever. There are obviously many potential explanations, but these are the big ones I could think of. The main point of this theory isn't really what form the knight takes in the light world, so I didn't really work through all of the logistics. But I felt like I should at least cover it to show that there are indeed ways it can work. I also think that each option leads to a slightly different outcome in terms of the whole dark world shadow thing, so the logistics are important to at least take into account. Then, there's one more thing. Which is, how the magic shadow was made in the first place, and I actually think this is the most important part. So obviously, for a shadow to be made, it needs some light to cast it. Shadows can't exist in pure darkness, since they just blend in. It's the light that makes the shadow able to exist, and it's there to contrast with the darkness. And this would absolutely be significant in regards to this theory, since in Deltarune, light is focused on almost as much as darkness is. Darkness is actively compared to the absence of light multiple times. Ralsei's monologue is the most notable example, but we also have entry 17 and Don't Forget, of course. Even outside of this, it's very clear that light and dark are a dichotomy, and this is a large focus of the prophecy. So, if the night is a darkness creature, it would make sense for the light to be a part of its nature too. Along with that, there has been something that's been associated with light a lot all throughout the game. The physical object that's shown to be somewhat of an embodiment of all the game's themes regarding light. This thing is, of course, Chris's soul. It's got angelic properties, lots of glowing, everything in Chapter 4, and, during boss fights, Chris even shines the light of their soul onto their party members. This makes it a pretty good pair with the night, which is a being seemingly made entirely out of darkness. So, the light inside Chris's soul is the light that's shining on Des, and creating her shadow. So that's pretty much what I think the night is. A dark projection of Des, created by Chris. This would explain why they seem connected in so many ways, and share all those similarities. The poses, the knife imagery, the hand imagery, the fact that Chris is a knight in the dark worlds, they make fountains, and the implication that their allegiance to the night might outweigh their friendship with the fun gang. I feel like it's undeniable that Chris and the knight have a really strong connection, that goes beyond being childhood friends or working together in the night conspiracy. And with this interpretation, they're bonded in a way that's unique to them, that also ties in directly with these themes that have been so prevalent throughout the whole game. The relationship between Chris and the knight seems like it's going to be a huge focus of the plot, and more than likely has something to do with how the knight got created in the first place. The knight being a representation of Des that Chris essentially created would definitely give them a unique dynamic. For a game with so much emphasis on contrast, it seems extremely fitting that Chris and Des would be the pair that the entire plot orbits around. They're a unit, but they're also opposites in many ways. Human and monster, short and large, the silent knight and the roaring knight, light and dark. Speaking of light and dark, there's something else about light that I think is interesting, which is that it is very, very powerful. It's the one thing that can override the dark, and bring you back to reality. Not only that, but light is also associated with hope. Well, we've known this since Chapter 1, but in Chapter 4 we learn a little extra thing from Gerson. He implies that it's not just the light that overwrites the dark, but the hope specifically. So then, what about the light in Chris's soul? Well, I think this means that the light contains their hopes and desires. Essentially, who they are as a person. I think this is pretty straightforward. I mean, it's always been clear that the soul represents the core of who Chris is, but I think it's important that this extends to the light in the soul as well. This light has Chris's entire being in it. And that's what makes it so significant that they use this power to create the night. Instead of using the light to overpower the darkness, they use it to make more. Remember how I said that Des's essence is imbued in the night? Well, I think Chris's essence is there too. So the night is like a combination of both Des and Chris. Since dark worlds reflect the will of the creator, I think something similar is happening here. The night reflects Chris and Des's combined will. This would of course explain why their dark worlds have the same colors, unlike Susie's. It's because they have the exact same will. So, yeah. This isn't just normal light casting a normal shadow. It's special light that contains Chris's essence, will, and hopes. I mean, don't get me wrong, Des is still a very important part of it, but I just think her role is a bit more complicated than simply being the knight. The main thing I'm trying to get at is that the power that created the knight, aka Chris, is just as important in all this as the knight itself. As for how this actually works, well, this is the harder part. Again, the important part is the symbolism and not so much the logistics, but it's probably important to consider how this would actually play into the plot. Well, I assume this all started during the bunker incident. It's pretty commonly accepted that Chris and Des got lost, followed the pointed tail to the bunker, and then something weird happened that trapped Des in the depths and or turned her into the night. This is probably also the moment where Chris's soul got all weird, and it's what started this whole night conspiracy thing. Anyway, I sort of have a vague idea of what went down here, based on everything else I've said. Under this theory, Chris would have cast some sort of spell or incantation, probably something similar to Unleash, and then that made the big special light that cast the magic shadow on Des. Obviously the shadow and light stuff would mostly be metaphorical, so I think something like this would work well enough. I think it'll be a similar situation to Azrael using the souls to break the barrier, in that it won't actually be explained how it works other than soul magic just being soul magic. Of course this would have been completely intentional on Chris's part, so it was likely the first step in their big plan. Chris and Des got together in the bunker and created the night, which would go and make the dark worlds with Chris. The shadow probably came to life because of the bunker's darkness, which I imagine is like regular darkness but more magic and special. So then the next big question is, where is the real Des? Well, the easiest explanation is of course that she's staying in the bunker. But she can still have an active role in the story even from there. What I think is happening is basically that she's controlling the night from the shadows. So it's still functionally Des, and not a whole new character. It's like what I talked about before, how shadows mimic your exact movements. That's what Des is doing, she's puppeting the night. I mean, it's probably not literal puppeting, because that would be weird, but I'm not really sure how it would work in practice. My best guess is that it has something to do with Des's will and how it affects the knight's actions, but that's just speculation. The one thing I'm confident in is that no matter what, the knight is fully under Des's control somehow. This would mean that the shadow isn't actually sapient and doesn't have its own intelligence. It's pretty much just a direct extension of Des. As you can see, this still leaves a ton of gaps and unknowns. But since it's pretty much all just guesses anyway, there are really a lot of ways it could go. I didn't feel like pinning down one specific explanation for how things played out, especially when it doesn't really matter much for the main part of the theory, which is the general idea of the knight being Des's shadow. I don't know if it's even anywhere close to correct, but I enjoy this theory and I think it fits pretty well with a lot of what we know about the knight. It's also a nice way for Deltarune to explore the themes of light and dark, specifically involving Chris and Des's relationship. I like these too. But, as with every other knight theory, it would take a lot of brain power to make this tie up every single loose end we're left with. I'm definitely not the first person to come up with the idea of the knight being some sort of creature based on Des's shadow, but I really like the concept and I think it has a lot of merit, so I wanted to talk about my own interpretation of it. Shadows carry a lot of symbolic weight that I feel is important, as well as just cool, to think about. But, I don't really have anything else to say about them. So, that's it for now.